I've been completely obsessed with this new watercolor technique for the past few weeks. It's so cool, and you aren't doing it yet. Stick around to see what I'm talking about. Here's what you do. While the paper is wet, you charge in different colors of paint into each other, and then you just let the angle of the paper do the work, letting them mix and flow into each other. Right now you're watching a sped up version of this, but keep watching because I'll share with you how I use it in a real painting. This is a technique you can only do in watercolor, and it takes an incredible advantage of the medium. First, it uses watercolor's transparency. As you can see, when the colors layer on each other, they peek through. Sometimes they'll mix together, but at the same time you can see the individual colors on their own. It looks different than whenever opaque paints put on each other. Second, it uses watercolor's granulating effect. To make it simple, granulation is where the paint doesn't completely mix, making a grainy or textured effect. Third, and most importantly, this technique uses the flow of watercolor and water. You can tilt your paper and let gravity do the work for you. So in this video, I'm primarily using this technique for the initial layer, then painting normally after that. It brings so much color and life to the painting, and I'm sure I can control it in the future to be more specific with how I use it. Now here's how this turned out. How cool is that? This is just something you can't do on your own. And then a few days later, I ended up turning into this amazing landscape. Look at the life and the color and the beauty in it. Now, before I show you how to use this in a painting, I'd really appreciate if you'd consider subscribing to the channel. You don't want to miss some of the amazing watercolor painting videos coming up in the future. They're going to be great. Thanks. Now let's keep going. This is a painting I did of my pet cat, Jesper. Now this blue is so granulating, and it's going to pop through everything else I lay down. As you can see, I have a board greatly tilted, so the paint flows at a crazy rate. I'm going to try and get the background somewhat cool in temperature, but really this is extremely experimental. I wasn't trying to be intentional where everything goes, although I did try and have Jesper's face be a little bit lighter, so that way whenever I painted it, it would be more accurate to him. Now watch as I put these other colors in. That red is complementary to the blue, so it usually grays out when you mix them together, and as you'll see, the colors just pop with each other. Just watch, they don't actually mix to that gray color. Just so you know, I'm using Arch 100% cotton cold press paper here, so it can really take a beating. I can put so much water because this type of paper handles water insanely well. So if you want to do this technique, try and get high quality paper, 100% cotton, and have it be at least 140 pounds so it really gets going. Now don't be afraid to just go to town with the colors, but two things you need to know. First, the paper has to stay wet. If it ends up getting too dry in a spot, the technique won't work as well and it'll start not performing like you would expect it to. Second, the paint will have a tendency to pool down where the gravity takes it. As you can see, I have to go back and soak it up every once in a while. And after a quick little time jump, we are now looking at a painting that is way lighter than what we had initially. And that's what happens with this technique. Because you use so much water, it ends up drying way paler and lighter than what you initially started out with. So if you're doing this technique and you see really intense paint and you're concerned about how to move forward with it, don't worry about it. Don't be concerned, because if you used enough water, it'll lighten up a ton, just like what happened here. Now I'm just going to only paint a few more additional layers to this painting, and I'm going to paint it like I do normally. And as I paint it, I want you to watch how the color of the first layer plays with the rest of this painting. It brings so much life to what would normally be a flat looking painting. Now Jesper is a pretty dark cat, so it makes him really easy to paint. I would probably make adjustments with the initial layer if I had a lighter cat model. If you want to see more details on how I paint cats and cat fur in my loose style, you can check out this other video I did recently in the card. I think I probably should have worked a little faster on his face, but I was really caught up on his tiger stripes. I just wanted to make them darker and darker, so I brought in thicker paint to get the initial structure down and to make it more accurate, but I think some of his face was drying a bit faster than what I was wanting. I'll end up coming back later and fixing any of those minor mistakes though, so it's not a big deal. One of the challenges with this technique, at least in the way I did it, was I didn't preserve any of the white of the paper. That means the first layer is the lightest the painting will get from now on, so I kind of had to improvise with the tufts of hair on Jesper's ears and any other light parts or glints in the fur. Now while I'm painting the rest of Jesper's face here, I just want to point out how cool the background is looking. You can really see the incredible granulation that took place, and all the subtle layers of colors is so pretty. There's so much life, and it makes everything just come together really well. Now when we start painting some of the background, things are going to get really cool, so keep an eye out for that. I had a lot of fun painting some of these little details in Jesper's face, such as the shadow that's underneath his mouth. I think it really makes it look like him, and it gives the illusion of depth. And I also really had fun with painting his body. I just came in, I just mixed in different colors that aren't necessarily real. Like, he doesn't actually have like purple fur or yellow fur, but it does make it work because of how the colors mix and match and how that underlayer really shines through. Now right now he kind of looks like a 2D cutout. He doesn't really have a lot of form and shadows in his body, but I will come back and add that later as it is needed. And I think once that background's added in, it'll really bring in the depth. Speaking of which, check out this background. Jesper is sitting on a couch, so I bring in this grayish blue-green for it, and it's thin enough that the color layer shines through from underneath. It just brings that all together, like I keep saying. And look at how much depth it gives it. If it was just a white underneath, if there wasn't this color layer, the couch would come across so flat. It wouldn't work like it would here. Instead, now it has some nice texture and it looks like the light in the scene is bringing color to it. In addition to that, it makes it look like a worn down couch, which is what it is. Now, of course, to show the form, I'm still going to go in and paint the different vertical lines in some of the shadow places. At first, the paper was still wet, so I have to come back with a thicker paint, and it ends up looking pretty worn out like the actual couch does, and it works pretty well. I think those vertical lines really were necessary for the three-dimensionality of the painting. But now with the couch in place, all the main details are pretty much done. I'm going to keep that background as is because it just brings so much warmth to the scene. I really like the subtlety in it. And all that's really left is to bring in the main darks and details in Jesper. It's amazing with watercolor just how bringing in the darkest darks of a painting ties everything together. I guess you could probably say that from other types of painting mediums, but I just know watercolor and gouache. I think it's because your eyes now have an understanding of the full range of value in a painting, and so things start to look right if they're right. As I'm finishing up this painting and just reflecting on it, I think this is a fun technique that I'm going to have to use in the future. In fact, I want to really play around with what would happen if I was more intentional with where I place the lights and darks and the different colors as I'm thinking about the painting I'm actually making rather than just putting them in random spots. I've also thought about what it would look like to do a second layer of these colors with actually thinking about the form of the painting. So for example, maybe I do it with Jesper and I do it with the couch, and then after that I go back with the normal painting layers. I wonder what it would look like and what would happen. There's so much experimenting that I could do. I also want to know if you guys have done this or if you're wanting to do this now, and just let me know in the comments what you think about this technique. I think it's so fun and so cool. You know, I'm still on my own art journey and I'm still learning so much about watercolor, and I'm growing as an artist every single time I paint, and this just reminds me that there's so much to be uncovered with watercolor painting, and this is just another tool that I can put in my toolbox, and I'm hoping to add more and more to it as time goes on. And I hope by watching these videos and taking in what I'm learning that it will happen for you too, that you will have the same experience on your own art journey. As I'm finishing up here, a cat does not look like a cat without whiskers, and so I'm bringing in some white gouache to paint in those whiskers that I couldn't do earlier, and I think we are done. Now before I show you that final painting, I wanted to give you a glimpse at some of the other ones I did with this technique. Here's a couple of Jesper. Oh man, these were so fun. I hope you do this technique. And then here's that landscape I showed you earlier. Oh, it turned out so cool and so much depth and life in it. And here's that final painting of Jesper. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to watch how to paint with just 3 colors, go ahead and click this video here.